Hey guys, this is Raymond. You're watching RPAD TV 3000, and I'm so happy to be hanging out with my next guest today. I am joined by Chip Carter, who is one of the first people I've met covering video games. Chip is a longtime columnist from the Chicago Tribune. He did some work for me when I was at Happy Puppy. Known him for over 20 years, but have not talked to him or seen him in a really long time. We're going to catch up about the good old days. We're going to talk about Chip's new show, where the food comes from. And Chip is an accomplished musician, so I have to ask him about guitar stuff. So, Chip, first of all, how are you doing today?
Rayman! Oh my God, it was so cool. This is what we used to call him because it used to be a game. A lot of people probably don't even know now about the old Rayman game. I don't know how much legs it had, but as soon as that came out, everybody instantly started calling you Rayman. So I think, I don't know, is it in the last few weeks you popped up on one of my social feeds somewhere, or I found you or you found me?
I found you through our common friend, Tom Ham, who you're still in touch with. And I'm like, oh, wow, there's a name I've not seen in a long time. And send you a friend request. We've been catching up little by little, but saving it for today.
Well, we had that when we talked on the phone the other day for just a few minutes, that was the first time we had talked in 15 years.
At least, yeah.
And it was just a flood of amazing memories. It's so exciting to be here. It's just so fun to think about.
I want to put this into context because
don't let me run your show. I have my own show, so I'm used to doing that. I will take your show over. Don't let me do it.
Just to give the people out there some context, when I first got into the business, you were like one of the guys. You were at the Chicago Tribune. Jeff Young, I forgot, he was like Wall Street Journal or something, and Dean Takahashi was either Wall Street Journal or Washington Post. But you were like the guys for video.
I got there before either of them. I came out of the newspaper world and I started working at home because I was starting to get big hits as a freelancer. And I had a 2-year-old son who didn't know me as well as he should know me. So it was a problem too, because his mom was not in the picture. So it was just me and him. And when I realized when he was 2, he knew the daycare ladies better than me and responded the same way to them he did to me. I made the commitment. I said, I'm going to stay home and write and raise my son. And it was a couple of years of really hard struggle. And a lot of times what I would do is play with and take care of him all day long, put him to bed, and then I'd work all night long and we'd start the cycle over again. And it was coming down to where I didn't know how much longer I was going to be able to sustain that. And we had just gotten a Nintendo. So I guess this was early 1990 when I got my first NES. Now, I got my first Atari way back in the day and went through that phase. And I was an arcade rat from the first time I saw one. But it took me a while to come back to Nintendo because I kind of didn't trust it after the Atari disappointment. It never grew. It never got better. It never improved. People got tired and they moved on. And then Nintendo was a thing and I kept hearing about it. And then actually I was so broke since I was a newspaper reporter. I could only have one credit card. Only one person would give me a credit card, and it was a department store in downtown Atlanta. And they didn't carry Nintendo. They carried the Sega Master System. So a couple of years before I had a Nintendo, I had a Sega Master System. And I would take my credit card in there once a month and buy a new game and come home. Nice. So I finally scratched together enough dough for a Nintendo. I figured in the long run it would save me money because you could rent games for the NES. You couldn't rent games for the Master System. So February, March 1990, me and my son Jonathan, who anybody who knows me probably knows Jonathan, and we'll wind up talking about him a lot too because he was a huge part of this. we were playing a lot of video games, and it was Zelda 2 that was the first one that really just sucked me so deep in. And we had to keep going back to the store every 3 days and renting it because we couldn't finish it. We couldn't beat it. And we were playing one day, and he was sitting there cuddled up with me, and I was just thinking, this is going to come to an end soon. I'm not going to be able to sustain this. And I was so profoundly sad. I was like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. So we paused the game for a bathroom break. And as I got up, I said, I probably wouldn't have to buy these video games or even rent these video games if I started reviewing them for the local paper. Maybe somebody would like to know games that are good for grown-ups to play, games that are good for kids to play, games you can play together. And I bet they'd send me free games if I started doing that for the local paper. I'll do it for free. They'll send me free games. Good deal. And I went around the corner down the hall to the bathroom, and it's like a blinding light went off. It's just like you hear, there was a, eureka moment. The eureka moment was, or I could take that idea to a national newspaper syndicate and turn it into my job.
Aha.
And like 3 months later, Raymond, in June of 1990, I signed with the Chicago Tribune to do an internationally distributed column on video games. And at that point, I became the first mainstream national media video game presence in the industry in the United States. So there were other people. There were people like, I think Glenn Rubenstein was already writing out in San Francisco.
That's right.
Some of the magazines were around. I think EGM might have even been around. Game Pro was around. But they were very niche things. So to put video games in a mainstream market, I mean, there were cities where, and the cool thing was, I actually did it with my son.
Yeah.
So byline was always Chip and Jonathan Carter. So we always had the kids' perspective in there too. So around the country, our column would run. It'd run in like the Sunday TV Guide.
Mm-hmm.
It would run. The coolest thing I ever saw was a few papers used to run it on the Sunday Funnies page on the front page. So you would have like Charlie Brown, Garfield, and Chip and Jonathan Carter on the video. So it was just, that's how all that started. And I realized like the first day, I'm like, what do I do? I looked up Nintendo's phone number. You could still do things like that.
That's right.
I called Nintendo and I said, my name is Chip Carter, and I just signed on with the Chicago Tribune to write a internationally syndicated column about video games. And they're like, oh, what's your address? This was 1990, Raymond. That's a difference. What? That's cool. What's your address? We're going to send you everything. And a couple of days later, the biggest box I've ever seen in my life showed up at our front door. And it was literally everything Nintendo had ever made except the robot and the Play and Watch.
Wow.
The original Play and Watch, which, I mean, literally everything. So you can imagine by then Jonathan was 4.5. So he totally got the whole Nintendo vibe. He understood. It's not like he was clueless about what was in the box. So he's going over the top. I'm pushing it over. We're tearing things out of there. It's like the best Christmas ever, and it's June. So it was just an extraordinary jump in. But all we had to do was pick up the phone and call Nintendo. So, and a note about the Game & Watch, what was really neat is a few years later, I think by then John was about 7. So he was as equally known as I was by that point. And I believe it was Arakawa, who was the president of Nintendo at the time. And he was in Seattle checking up on business. And he requested a private meeting with me and Jonathan.
Wow.
Or so I thought. So we go out to Redmond. We go in the office. They usher us into his office, and we get all the traditional proper Japanese greetings and bowings, and we had practiced and everything else. And he shook my hand and said, It's very nice to meet you. You can leave now.
What?
He had like the perfect test subject. A 7-year-old who was knowledgeable, passionate about video games, and really smart.
He just wanted John.
All he wanted to do was interview Jonathan. All he wanted to do was pump him for info. So it's entirely possible that an entire generation of Nintendo games was based on that conversation with Jonathan.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
But that was also the early 90s too. Some grown man says, I want to take your 7-year-old son in my office, and now you leave and we'll come out when we're coming out.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Now, your column from the Chicago Tribune, it paved the way for guys like, Jeff Young, Tom Ham, Mark Saltzman, and my childhood hero, Dean Takahashi, all fantastic columnists, writers, and you're really one of the guys that started it all for mainstream coverage of video games. So thank you for all of us. But let's talk about the good old days from the 90s and the aughts. What do you miss about covering video games? Because it was such a wild time back then.
Everything. Pre-2001, everything. From the time I remember, really in the 90s, it was the literal wild, wild west.
Yeah.
We could do anything. I was syndicated with the Tribune, which meant I was independent, so they weren't going to pay for me to travel and go places and things like that. So that's when the infamous junkets started. Mm-hmm. And the first one was Nintendo reached out to me, 91 was the first Nintendo World Championships. How would you and Jonathan like to come out to Hollywood and hang out with the stars we have coming and be in the audience and be part of the first Nintendo ever World Championships? I'm like, I can't believe somebody just asked me that question and asked me, do I want to? After that, would y'all be interested in that? What? Did you hear what you just said? And so that was the first time we got on an airplane and headed anywhere. And at one point a few years ago, and it was a spectacular few days. And of course they paid for everything. Absolutely was not supposed to happen in the journalism world. But I had asked the Tribune, would y'all pay for me to go to this thing to cover it? They're like, hell no. I'm like, well, we already have some ethical decisions to make now, don't we? But I think the junkets were critical. And we're going to get into that. We're going to explain to people who don't know what that is. That's a press trip where everything is paid for, and they're basically just lining up to kiss your ass. And to impress you. And they would spend several days trying to impress you. And I don't know about you, but they impressed the hell out of me, right? And it was a kind of a ethical gray area. It was a brand new thing. Nobody was doing it. Nobody had ever done it. I knew it was really important for me to go visit these companies and see these games in development.
Sure.
Somebody would burn you off an old EEPROM or something every now and again and send it to you so you could pre-play a game. But mostly you had to see them coming along the way. And so the huge value in us, they'd pay our expenses. We'd go have an absolute blast. And then we would come home and be ready to write about what we had just learned.
Yeah.
But I made a decision early on. I will accept that, but it's never going to influence what I'm saying about a game.
Right.
If they spend $10,000 to take us on some fabulous junket, and I bet some of them cost that easy.
Oh, for sure.
Tell you about the time I flew a fighter plane. I think they had to rub some nickels together for that one. But the decision was, don't cross that ethical line. Yeah. Take the trip, use it for the research, have the fun, give your son a true education of the world. Let him travel, let him experience, let him see. Don't let it impact what you say about the games.
Yeah.
Now, what it would do, I had 800 words every week for an international audience of millions, hundreds of millions. But I had about 800 words a week. I had to decide early on, are we going to pan games? Why would I tell you about a game that you will not like when I've got 800 words and I can tell you about 3 that you will like?
Okay.
So that always stuck with me. That was kind of one knock on us, but that's because we were mainstream. We weren't writing for Nerd Gamer or anything
Right.
like that.
And your space was much more limited than the enthusiast press.
It was much more limited, and also it was for much more of a casual market. It was for what was for kids who were growing up playing gamers. It was for the weirdos like us who were already adult gamers.
Right.
And it was almost like a secret shame. I play video games at night, you know.
Yeah, it's very different than today. Like,
oh God, yes,
yeah. Because I mean, today almost all American adults are gamers. It's like saying, "Do you play games?" is the same as "Do you watch movies?" Well,
absolutely. Of your grandma knows what Mario is.
Yeah,
your grandma at some point has held the controller and go, "I can't make him jump. I don't know how," you know.
But when you started, very very different. It was not. It was not as accepted.
Oh no, you were absolutely a freak. You know, if you were in your late 20s and playing video games, everybody's like, you still play with Slinkies and Tinker Toys and Legos and everything? And like, Legos, yeah. But so, you got a problem with that?
And for the younger kids that might not know what a Slinky is, no, I'm just kidding.
I was worried about that. That's why I brought Legos in. I'm like, I just name checked 2 things that may well not exist anymore in Slinky and Tinker Toys. They may not even be around anymore. So there was, you know, always that kind of thing of what you do, what I play video games. Yeah. And then when it became my job, man, I didn't go anywhere for the next 20 years that people didn't know what I did.
So earlier we were talking about the press junkets.
Yeah. Oh God.
Is the one that stands out as, you know, either the most extravagant or the craziest time you had on the road? Because you spent a lot. You were at every junket I've been to, and I'm sure you were at a lot more that I wasn't invited to.
And I'm sure there were some that you were at that we weren't at. Ubisoft used to piss me off annually with their France trip. They never thought we were, even though we were big, we weren't serious. We weren't going to, you know, spend 3,000 words detailing the artistry of a Ubisoft game, of which I believe Rayman was one.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. So
you were correct.
That made us all the more pissed off after we met you. We're kind of like, you named a game after our best friend, and you still won't bring us to France. So we never got to go on the French trip. Did you ever go on one of those?
No.
Oh, okay. Then Ubisoft, we hate you.
They took me to Hawaii, so that's okay. I'm cool.
Okay, we didn't get the Hawaii invite. See, there were a couple that I would miss because they're kind of like, we got to buy 2 transcontinental plane tickets and everything else. But most people didn't care. They understood it was part of the package. I did take a lot of trips without Jonathan.
Yeah.
You know, there were some where it just wasn't appropriate, including the most extraordinary one I ever went on. You know, I told you about the first one, and it was so funny. All the Full House kids were there, and all the Home Improvement kids were there, and Nell Carter and that whole gang. It was like every one of those sitcoms in those genres, all of those stars were at the first Nintendo World Championship.
Wow.
So I'm kind of like, this could be very interesting. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. But I think probably the most extravagant and the one that really got my attention, and one of the ones Jonathan didn't go on, was when Sega put out the first game for the old Sega CD system, Tomcat Alley. Do you remember it?
No, I don't.
It was like a combination film and graphics package, and you were piloting an F-15 Tomcat, And they called me one day. I had since, obviously, after I called Nintendo and got the big box, the very next call I made was to Sega, where I met a cat named Mark Smotroff, who was their director of marketing at the time. Brilliant musician. And we are still friends today. So I got to shout out, Mark. What's up, brother? I called Sega and they're kind of like, yeah, sure. Here's everything we make. And Mark and I met, and a couple of years go by and the Sega CD system is released with no games. And yeah, they're kind of like, well, the games are coming. All right, fine. So we had a Sega CD and no game. And they're kind of like, all right, our first game is be a fighter plane game. Oh, that's cool. We'll look forward to that. Have you ever flown a fighter plane? Sure. Yeah. Grew up as a preacher's son in the backwoods of Georgia. We used to fly fighter planes every day. We would go out there. I'm like, what the hell do you mean I've ever flown a fighter plane? They said, well, we would like for you to know what it's like so that when you do get the game, you will be able to compare the experience and see how realistic it is.
Wow.
I said, I'm game. So we went out. They brought me out to Orange County Airport. And it was one of those kind of things where they used the NATO trainers. They use them to train NATO pilots. So it's side-by-side seats in the cockpit with dual controls on both sides. And they brought down pilots from Top Gun, from Miramar, to be our instructors and co-pilots.
Wow.
And then they put you through like a training in the morning, and then you go and the pilot takes off, and we flew south to San Diego over San Diego Bay, and you went by twos, and the planes were tricked out with like laser tag weapon systems.
Nice.
So we were actually going to have a dogfight over the water in San Diego Bay. And it was just extraordinary. We got about 200 feet in the air, and my pilot, his name was Skids. They all got those cool names. Said, controls are yours. And so we flew and we worked flying on information and wingtip to wingtip and that kind of stuff. When we got to San Diego, we pulled a mile apart from each other, did a loop, and then did a pass, like 2 nights jousting. And as soon as we passed, the dogfight was on. Now, here's the thing that somehow got left out of all of that. I immediately went into a power dive. And at one point, we were pulling 7.2 Gs. The cockpit camera blacked out. And as we were coming up out of it, I realized I was blacking out too, because all the color was draining out of the world like old black and white TV. So they said, you got to squeeze every muscle in your body, starting with your toes and work your way up to push the blood back into your brain. Okay, that sounds safe. So so didn't pass out, kept flying the plane, scored a couple of hits, and I shot the other guy. I was coming down, I was diving down out of the sun on top of him, and I tagged him, and smoke started coming out of his plane. Oh shit! What have I done? And the guy's like, good hit. And I'm like, what do you mean? And so I'm kind of freaking out. I'm like, there's a plane going to crash below us. Well, then he loops up and tags us. All of a sudden, the cockpit is full of smoke. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, no, don't worry. It's his laser tag. He said these planes are triggered that when somebody registers a strike, there's a little valve that opens and dumps a little oil on the engine block, and it makes the smoke. That's how you know you got a hit. So at that point, he takes the cockpit. He just reaches up and pops the cockpit off. We were flying upside down at the time because, look, I'm flying the plane, Raymond. It's everything. And later on review of the tape, it looks like an expert pilot. And this guy was just like, you're amazing. You're amazing. You're amazing. What they didn't know, it's just a lunatic flying an airplane. Is all it is. So that was super extraordinary. And we came back. I got us back to Orange County Airport. And he said, do you want to land? I'm kind of like, aren't you supposed to do that? That's what the training said. You will land the plane. He said, yeah, but you got this. He said, go for it. Land it. I'm like, dude, that's enough. You talk about pushing the envelope. I just pushed mine as far as it will go. Please bring me home. Get me back on the ground. And I get in, and they've got a huge buffet spread like they always did at these things, set up in one of the hangars. And I'm in there eating, and one of the Sega reps comes and taps me on the shoulder and says, "There's somebody who wants to meet you." And I came out of the hangar, and I saw a kid getting out of a plane coming back from his flight. And it was a young, very green, and I mean like physically green, like throwing up, not untested, but green, literally the color green, Joel Easley, who walked up to me. At that time, I think he was 14 or 15 years old. And he had just started writing for a handful of papers around him because he had grown up reading our column.
Yeah.
He could do it too. And so then we kind of took Joel under our wing because I was always traveling with Jonathan, who was 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11. And Joel was 14, 15, 16, 17. So there were a lot of those trips when you guys were going out to the bars before John got old enough to hold my beer. Where me and John and Joel would be hanging out at the hotel because I got minors, Yeah. But then there was a lot of times I didn't travel with Jonathan also for that very reason. So that one was pretty extreme. Let me ask you real quick.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I don't think you were on it, but did you ever hear about the legendary cross country?
The train trip.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nintendo by Amtrak for the first Zelda Game Boy game. We were on that. It was every bit as insane as everything you've heard. And I'll just shortcut this by telling people that story in multiple versions is on the internet, told by multiple writers as they experienced it or heard it secondhand later. It's all true, but some of the best parts aren't even on there. So.
Well,
Andy Richter sleeping in his cabin so hard on the train that we changed trains in Chicago, and he could not be woken up, so they had to bring in the fire department with an axe to break down the door to wake Andy up, so we could make the next train and connect and move on as we went to Seattle. But yeah, let's name check. Let's go.
All right, so. We're going to talk about some of our old friends. My old college roommate, Jeff Castaneda.
Jeff!
He's known you for a long time. Jeff is now vice president of Samsung or something.
Yeah, he made something of himself, didn't
he? He really did. But you worked with him for more than a decade. So
ages. And he was tied in with Steven Stiles.
That's right.
Steven? And Steven was like a survivor of the old Warhol era New York. So that dude knew everything. And Jeff was his apprentice. That's how I learned New York City, was with Steven Stile on one arm and Jeff Castaneda on the other, going, come on, let me show you what New York really is. It's just an obscene privilege. It's just everywhere we went, everything we did, everything we saw, every experience we had, every 11-star hotel we stayed in, every 30-star meal we were gifted with, all the trinkets, the treasures, the things, the little gifts and things. I got a climate-controlled storage room in a warehouse that is nothing but all that old stuff, Raymond.
Nice.
And about 1 million video games. So that were all free. I didn't pay for any of them.
Nice.
They're probably some very old Atari ones.
Now, let's talk about your new job. You're working on a show that's very, very different. Can you tell the people out there what your show is and how you got started?
I think I can do it real easy. You see this shirt I'm wearing?
Oh wait, let me get you. Okay.
See the shirt I'm wearing? This is something would you have been surprised to have seen me in this in the 90s?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Here's the wrinkle. Here it is today. That's the North Carolina Sweet Potato Commission.
Uh-huh.
So, hey, there's hip farmers too.
Yeah.
Just not so many. I make a show called Where the Food Comes From. It airs Fridays at 9:30 and 12:30 a.m. Eastern on a cable and satellite network called the RFD TV network. It's what it is. It's farms and food. And we literally go out and show you where the food comes from and what they have to do to make it happen. We've developed so much interest in what we eat and how we're eating. And this is sea change that is real. And what first put the idea in my head was when Jonathan and his friends were in their mid-teens and he started turning down Coca-Cola.
Oh.
Like, what? No, I think I'll pass. I'm like, why? It's delicious. Dad, it's got the high fructose corn syrup in it. And I'm kind of like, yeah, it's delicious. He's like, yeah, but your body doesn't know what that is. Me and my friends have been talking, and your body doesn't know how to process this. I'm like, you're 14, 15 years old. What do you care how it processes it? But then as I kept paying attention and I kept listening, and one thing about me is forever, when I was younger, I always sought out the company and counsel of older people, whose work I respected and who were doing things that made me excited and that I respected. And I talked to them and I listened to what they had to say and I paid attention to them. And now that that script has flipped, I constantly seek out the counsel of people younger than me, whose work I admire and respect, and I talk to them and I pay attention and I listen to what they say. And I think that's part of what has kept me relevant. Is part of the reason that, I talk to a lot of my friends. I'm like, well, what are you doing this weekend? They're like, well, I'm gonna mow the grass, and then me and Cindy are gonna go to Home Depot, and then like, what are you doing? Well, I'm getting in the car and we're about to ride 1,200 miles to a water buffalo farm in the North Carolina mountains where we're going to milk water buffaloes and make gelato and buffalo mozzarella cheese the real way, the authentic way.
Nice.
Yeah. Then we're going to go visit Christmas tree farmers and we're going to show you how your Christmas trees grow and where they come from. And then, we're going to go tell stories. You would think a farm would be a boring place. And I sure as hell thought that growing up in the country. Never, if you'd have asked me any time before I was probably, in my mid 40s, will you ever be back in the country and back on farms? What is wrong with you? I worked so hard to get it out of there in the first place.
Yeah.
But when I heard Jonathan and his friends start talking, and I realized over the next couple of 3 years, that was real. That was legit. That was not a passing thing. They really did care about what they were eating and how it was going to impact their health moving forward. And they had seen a couple of generations of the parents and grandparents getting fatter and sicker. And, that they're the generation, you guys are the generation who figured out it's in the food. It's what we're eating. And that's when I started thinking very seriously about taking this turn towards food in the farm world. And by 2009, I actually had a concept for what would become this show that I pitched to PBS. They were very enthusiastic about it, but their sponsorship model was so crazy. And it was going to cost me something like $30,000 to do a pilot. And I just couldn't do it. I'm kind of like, that's too much of a dice roll.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's make a TV pilot and hope it gets picked up somewhere. That sounds like a great thing to do. So instead I said, I'm going to find out. And I published a magazine the last few years that I was syndicated here. I live in Tampa, Florida. Now I'm in Tampa Bay. Yes, I'm in the craziest state in the world, but I'm in one of the coolest parts of it. The folks in Tampa Bay are very chill, and I visited in 93, instantly fell in love, moved down in 95, brought Jonathan with me, of course, and we never looked back. So I published a magazine around here, and I found that a lot of the things that resonated with the readership was things that I was interested in and things that made me want to move to Florida in the first place, the orange groves. You know, when I coached Jonathan's youth soccer team, it was surrounded on 3 sides by orange groves. So you go out for a Saturday morning game and it's just the oranges are blossoming. It was just like being in paradise. And I found I loved all of it, and I just fell in love with all of it. And it's the first time I ever really started to embrace my roots and where I was from, because it was something I was always kind of embarrassed by, and I'd always kind of tried to hide under my hat.
Right.
You know, I had taken all of the Southern country accent out of my voice, and I talked a lot like this in the 90s, as if I was always on the air, which, you know, it worked for where we were. And then over time, as people realized, geez, you're an international syndicated columnist. We don't care where you're from. You must not be dumb. So then I started really being more of who I was. And as I started going out and doing these stories from a magazine, it's like a hydroponic strawberry grower. I just found that fascinating. Well, so did my readers. Okay, I think there's something going on here. Given that people were really responding to these stories I was doing in this magazine, and given my straight up country agricultural roots, you know, and my growing acceptance and then embracing of those, it just made it a beautiful time for me to think seriously about going into the food world. Okay. And out of the blue, a trade publication got in touch with me and said, would you be interested in being a Florida editor for us? So what would you want me to do? Go out to farms, look at farms, talk to these people about what's going on, and write about farms. Yeah, let's try that. About 6 weeks in it, I was coming home and from yet another farm visit and another farm tour and another conversation with farmers about what they did and how they did it. And I was on the way home and I realized, I'm like, man, either I am super, 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 super bored, or this shit is fascinating. Turns out it was fascinating, thank God, because otherwise I would have spent the last 12 years of my life for nothing. But what I also learned really quickly, I thought it would be easy. I already had the concept and a first draft of a script for what this show eventually became, and that was like 2009. In fact, I bought the URL where the food comes from in 2013. And the show finally went on the air this January. So some of it was a growth curve. I found out in a hurry that farming and farmers had changed a whole lot from when I was growing up in the country. And what they did now from a technological standpoint, the people were the exact same beautiful, wonderful people who I grew up with. And, you know, Aunt Billy and Uncle Buck and Meemaw and that whole gang, you know, they're the exact same beautiful people. But what they were doing was just space age. And I knew I was not qualified to speak about it, much less with any kind of authority. So I spent about 5 years with that publication, and I just traveled North America nonstop. I mean, from the Rio Grande Valley, you know, running away from drug traffickers out in the desert on my way to a farm, you know,
wow,
up the Delaware River to all the ports along the Delaware River from Wilmington to Jersey that people don't know. That's where almost all of the imported fruit comes in, because that's where they're set up to handle all of that. So the bananas go to one port and the grapes go to one port and the oranges go to one port. And it just, man, as I traveled, I started going to Canada and I would see what they're doing now. They're going in space age, high tech hot houses.
Yeah.
I mean, they're hundreds of acres inside these things, and they're producing in not hundreds of acres, but just they're huge. They produce on 18 or 20 acres what a conventional farm would produce on 500, 800, 1,000 acres. They're also able to control the process very well, control environmental impact, reduce water inputs, reduce any kind of ecological damage. So it's brilliant. It's how we're gonna grow food on the Mars colonies and on the moon. So even though we are working on an episode right now with the scientists who just very recently, I have no idea why it took so long. They just did an experiment to see if they could get anything to grow in the lunar soil that the Apollo missions brought back.
Uh-huh.
They did that at the University of Florida, and the answer, amazingly, is yes. They've been able to grow grasses and plants. They haven't tried food yet. They're going to try next to see if they can plant seeds in lunar soil and grow food. So that's the kind of thing. So we're going to the deep country. Fast forward, in 2016, I started the company, CBC3 Media, that is now the production company for the show Where the Food Comes From, which in 2023 may or may not stay on RFD-TV, but in any case, we're moving forward in syndication on what we're calling the Where the Food Comes From family of networks, which is going to take us out from behind the cable and satellite wall and out from behind any paywalls and make us universally available on broadcast, streaming, OTT, cable, satellite, without paywalls. So everybody's going to be able to see that show. And a couple of Christmas specials we just produced along the way that are pretty cool.
I want to ask you about those in a second. Right now, you were talking about the water buffalo episode, which sounded incredible. What was the most fascinating experience or one of the most interesting things you learned while making the show?
I mean, that's one of them. And the first fascinating thing I learned is they're huge. Because you got to think, I started my day at 7:30 a.m. milking a water buffalo.
Yeah.
You remember what a happy early bird riser I am, I'm sure, from the junkets where they would have a call before noon. I was never happy about it. If I was in California, I could hack because at least they spotted me 3 hours coming from the East Coast. But so there I am, and they bring me into the dairy barn. If you've never been in a dairy barn, you'll know when you see the show. There's a pit in the middle of the barn. That's where the person whose job it is to milk the animals, and the actual title, the girl whose job that is, her actual title is milkmaid.
Uh-huh.
What? Yeah. That's like, you wouldn't even think that's still that's like saying, what do you do? I'm a knight. Oh, okay. That's cool. Yeah, I ride around on a horse and, protect people and things. Oh, that's a good job. What do you do? I'm a milkmaid. Well, clearly you milk things, including water buffalo. So you go down in this pit that's about up to mid-arm.
Okay.
So you're beneath the water buffalo. So 7:30 in the morning, I'm standing there staring up at water buffalo titties with a girl who's a professional milkmaid standing there saying, we're going to milk a water buffalo. And I'm like, hello, Lucy. And until that morning, I had never seen a water buffalo except in photos or films or something like that. And here I am about to get very intimate and personal with one. So we got her all milked, and then the next step was we took the milk from the water buffaloes and in the old straight up milk jugs, the big metal buckets, and we went into the creamery, and it goes straight into the mixers and everything. We started making the gelato, and like 2 hours later, we're eating that gelato.
Cool.
The cheese process is a lot more difficult, but just the whole story, what's at the heart of that story is obviously, wow, that's crazy, weird, and cool. So now everything we do is as exotic as water buffalo. I mean, we do sweet potatoes and things like that. But what was at the heart of that episode, and what's at the heart of every episode, is the heart of the farmer. They're just the best people. We've got this image of farmers sitting there chewing on a weed, and they're not real bright, and they're kicked back on the front porch in their rocking chair. Everything's taken care of, and they got a cool lemonade in their hand, and then life's just hunky dory. These people are brilliant. Absolute geniuses. They have to be. They're extraordinary business people. They're extraordinary marketers. But virtually every one of them, it's hard for me to think of any I have met who at the core of why they farm is a genuine care and concern for their fellow man and their feeling that their contribution to the world is to feed it. And it just resonates, in an era where we're all looking for something 100% authentic. Everybody's looking for anything real.
Yeah.
Give me something that's not prepackaged. Give me something that a spin doctor hadn't gotten a hold of. Give me something that a marketing committee didn't meet on before you showed it to me. Just show me something real. Give me something real I can believe in. This is something real to believe in. And it's where I found my purpose. I realized, especially at my age, even with my resume, which is pretty damn good, nobody was knocking on my door and saying, hey, why don't you come in here and make a TV show? And I figured out about 6 years ago, if I was going to do this, I was going to have to build the machine. Now, hopefully at this point with season 2 on the air, looking at moving into syndication, the Christmas specials are moving. I honestly think I'm months away from being able to get out from behind this desk. And then all I'm going to do is make TV shows, make music, and play video games with my grandkids.
So Chip, real quick, I know you have 2 Christmas specials coming up. Can you tell the people what they can expect from those?
The first one is called Larry's Tree, A Christmas Journey to the White House. There's a contest every year that literally no one knows about among Christmas tree farmers to be the farmer who is selected to provide the 22-foot Christmas tree for the Blue Room at the White House. And this is their Super Bowl. This is their huge moment. Yeah. This guy's been trying to win this, lives in a little town high in the North Carolina mountains, population 698. Wow. Yeah. It still has, it's the last Radio Shack anywhere in the world. Huh. They have the last Radio Shack. If you're ever wondering, it's in Newland, North Carolina. He won this contest after 40 years of trying. So we went up and we spent some time with him and his family. We were there when the team from the White House came down and picked the tree. We came back when they harvested it. We follow it all the way to Washington, D.C., where we see our little farmer transformed, and he's wearing like a $8,000 Armani suit and in front of the White House, and his trees rolling in on the horse and carriage. Then we just see the whole White House come alive. Bonus, that last 3.5-minute montage is set over my arrangement of Oh Holy Night. So that's me.
Very cool.
Well, when you're the producer, you can put your own music in shows and people can't tell you can't. So we're excited about that one. The other one, excuse me, it's called A Stetson Mansion Christmas. And if you have ever owned a cowboy hat or put one on your head, John B. Stetson's name was possibly inside it. He invented the cowboy hat.
Yeah.
He was also the first Yankee industrialist millionaire to move to Florida and build a winter place. He built a Gilded Age mansion in what is now DeLand, Florida in the 1880s. And a few years ago, it had fallen into real disrepair, and a couple bought it and restored it, decided to open it to the public as a place of historical interest. There's pictures of John B. Stetson and Thomas Edison in this home where Edison is there. They signed the tags on the fuse box. Edison himself personally wired the home for electricity. It was the first electricity in Florida. So presidents, kings, queens, everybody stayed at the Stetson Mansion. Now every year they transform it for Christmas, and it's just spectacular. Every room is a different theme. And it's one of the coolest stories we've ever gotten to tell, because we get to tell the Stetson story. We get to tell the home story. We get to tell this, amazing story about JT and Michael, middle-aged couple who just made it their mission to bring this home back to its grandeur. Michael is kind of the spokesperson, and JT is the quiet artistic genius behind the scene, but he's the one who's responsible for all the actual thematic elements, and Michael is just kind of like the mouthpiece for it. So it's just a great story, and it's two different sides of small town America, and it's sides that most people never see. Since I'm from these places and grew up in these places, I know these stories are there.
Yeah.
And the first thing, I said earlier, coming home after the first few farm visits, I was like, either I'm really bored or this is really fascinating. And it took me a long time to figure out why, with these amazing stories that we're telling, like the farm stories and now Stetson Mansion and Larry's story, I'm like, why aren't these stories being told? And I realized, because the mainstream media never comes out to the country. You were one of them for over 20 years, and you never came back. I'm like, oh. So it's like I've stumbled upon this whole pool that I was born into. I'm thrown back in the briar patch, and it's working for me.
Absolutely. It absolutely is.
Working for me. After a lot of time of denying my roots and who I am and where I'm from, really, probably about age 40, I started embracing them, and it's just been completely life-changing ever since. And now I'm still the international guy who spent 20 years in the video game industry, staying at the Four Seasons and the Riga Royale and every Ritz-Carlton and the Del Coronado in San Diego, which was one of my all-time favorite junket spots. We went there multiple times.
Awesome.
You were there for some of those. And now we're in Faison, North Carolina, and the Motel 6. We're driving thousands. We've traveled tens of thousands of miles. I knew I had to learn what I was talking about and to be able to speak authoritatively about it. Right. But also to get to know these people and to be able to tell their true heart, passion stories. So those kind of things are working out. We're having fun. And along the way, a long dormant, some would say never launched, musical career was also reborn. So that's kind of fun.
Yes, we're going to get into that soon, but I just want to remind everyone out there, if you want to learn more about Chip's show, where the food comes from, there is a link in the description. Go check it out. You will be entertained and you will learn things. It's just a fascinating, wonderful show. I'm glad that next year more people will be able to see it.
We are too, and you'll be able to, the Christmas specials be able to seen by everybody too. They're going out on 14 networks. You'll be able to put it on your Roku, your Fire Stick, your Chromecast, the internet. It'll be on TV where you turn on, you got your HD antenna. We'll be in 500 markets like that. So yeah, just go to our website. We're going to have all of that information. We're going to make sure everybody knows where to find that, these two shows, and where they're going to be able to find where the food comes from in 2023.
Now, I want to take a second to thank my sponsor at Journey Instruments. These guys make some fantastic travel guitars. They make awesome carbon fiber guitars, which also are fantastic for travel. The model Journey is most known for is the Overhead, which is a small acoustic guitar that can fold up into a carry-on bag. The neck detaches really easily, goes into a bag that you can fit into an overhead compartment. For 2+ years, I've been playing the Journey Road Trip, which is a little bit larger, not as easy to take the neck off, but it's a carbon fiber guitar. Awesome for travel because unlike wood, carbon fiber is not affected by humidity changes or temperature changes. I live in Las Vegas right now, just outside of Las Vegas, but I do have family in Hawaii and the Philippines. I go to Southeast Asia as much as I can. And, this is really different weather. It's dry in the Las Vegas area, and over there it's humid as hell. Journey has a new model out called the First Class. So you get the convenience of the Overhead, but it's bigger than the Overhead. It's closer to the size of the Road Trip, which I play. So you get that bigger, fuller sound with the convenience that fits into a bag that can go into your overhead compartment. If you want to learn more about it, go to journeyinstruments.com. I want to thank them again for sponsoring this episode of RPAD TV 3000. Now, Chip, let's talk about your music. Here's a great photo of you in the studio. You and I have very different musical tastes, but you're an accomplished musician. A lot of people know you from the Bulldog song, which is excellent. There's also a link to the Bulldog song in the description. Please check that out. I want to hear about your guitar tastes, how you started playing, what do you like to play, all that kind of stuff.
You know, it's funny. You say our musical tastes are different. They're really not. Our musical styles are different.
Okay. Yeah.
Our musical tastes are not different because I'm literally all over the board. I listen to everything and I love everything. Here's the thing. I think most of everything is garbage. So I'm always looking for that 1% in everything that's the absolute gold. And I don't care if that's samba or hip hop or jazz or death metal or whatever, you know, there's about 1% of it that breaks through the clutter and it's just sheer genius and pure art.
Yeah.
And that might be Johnny Cash in 1963, and it might be Portugal the Man with an unexpected radio hit that makes everybody go, what? You know, in the 2000s and 20s. So our tastes aren't that different. Our styles are different. And I think that has everything to do with where we grew up, how we grew up. What people wouldn't understand about our video game days is that you were a kid, you know, you were a young guy. I was already a grown-ass man with a child. Yeah, was doing this. So my roots went back a little further. What I love about that is I mentioned earlier my extended adolescence, and that's very, very true. So I've got all the cultural touch points of the 70s when I was a kid, and the 50s and 60s archive of music. And then as a musician and a lover of music history, I went all the way back, you know. So to me, music has eras, but to me, one of the true blessings in my life is that I got to get so immersed in pop culture in the 90s and 2000s professionally that I wound up with all the same cultural touch points and touchstones that you guys have. So you want to talk Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Great. Me and Jonathan were watching them every day, you know. You want to talk about the SNCC Saturday night lineup on Nickelodeon? I got you. I'm your boy. You know, and you want to talk about music from any era? Yeah. People get a certain age and they lose those cultural touch points and they get trapped in an era. And I'm really, really grateful that never happened to me because I'm always discovering, I'm always learning, I'm always still, you know, people are like, well, they just don't make good music like they used to. I'm like, you're just not looking for it because it's everywhere, man, especially now, which is the beauty of this, you know, our technology driven world is that niches are a real thing. A niche musical genre or something used to be a horrible thing to be because your audience could never find you. And now they can beat a path right to your door.
Yeah, discovery is just so much better now because before it used to be whatever the DJ played or whatever the VJ was playing. That's what you were exposed to. But now online audio and video, there's so many great ways to discover new artists. It's wonderful.
And it's extraordinary. And I swim in every one of those pools. And I wish I could play every one of those styles. We were filming an episode in the mountains and I was introduced to a family bluegrass band. And I mean, it was two families that combined to make a traditional mountain Appalachian bluegrass band. And the fiddle player was 14. The bass player was 14. The mandolin player was 17. You know, so I brought a couple of guitars and they're like, sit in and jam with us. And they started playing. Raymond, I wound up playing washboard rhythm. That was my, every now and again, I'd throw in a little fill or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, these kids were so incredibly accomplished. They grew up with these instruments in their hands, and almost every one of them, whatever instrument they were playing, if they were playing the mandolin, the guy go, well, that's not his best instrument. He's actually better on the piano. I'm like, wow. Okay, because he's already the greatest mandolin player I've ever heard in my life. So, so it was extraordinary to sit there, and I couldn't play with them. I could sing with them, and I could scratch out rhythm and throw in a lead lick every now and again that had no place in bluegrass music, but sounded pretty cool. But I could not play with those cats. And that's the same reason I can't play the kind of metal that you like. My hands don't work like that. I'd be right back behind you going, that'd be my jam. That'd be my part. This is all I would know how to do. So my music, people today call it country music, and they say I'm a country singer and guitarist, but what we would really have called it back in the day was Southern rock. Where I'm from, we heard a lot of Leonard Skinner and things like that. But at the same time, I was also discovering Mick Taylor, who was the greatest Rolling Stones era guitarist. That was when the Rolling Stones were great, was when Mick Taylor was driving the music. And then I'm dipping back and discovering John Lee Hooker and Django Reinhardt and Charlie Christian and all. It's like, oh my God. And Mark Smotroff, who I name checked earlier, growing up in New Jersey, the next street over in his neighborhood was Les Paul's house.
Whoa.
So Mark, when he was a kid, would go over and goof around on the log, the original electric guitar that Les Paul made. And he just grew up hanging out in Les Paul's garage, so it was just extraordinary. So, to large part, I think our musical styles are developed culturally based on where we're from, because that's the other kids we start playing music with. Right. So we were going to be playing a lot of Skinner and a lot of Allman Brothers and a lot of that kind of stuff. And that's what we're learning to play. And then these other influences started to creep into my musical style. And through the better part, until I was 40 years old, I thought I was a hard rock musician. I mean, I was, what do you do? I play hard rock. I'm not, and I wouldn't even sing like me. And I think, honestly, I short-circuited myself. And when I was like 39 years old, I finally bit the bullet. And I told you I'd gone through this process learning to embrace where I'm from and that side of me. And I woke up one day with what could only be described as a country song in my head. It was called .com Blues. So even then.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I had written a bunch of songs that would be considered country, and that style has evolved. And in 2015, I wrote the Bulldog song, lifelong Georgia Bulldog fan. Represent. It's a great time to be a Georgia Bulldog in this world right now. So we're having some fun. And I wrote it just as a tribute to my team. And I was not thinking any kind of musical, but after beyond anything other than this would be really cool today to do, and maybe some folks will like it.
Right.
Oh wow, it's been played like 500,000 times. The Facebook page has over 17,000 followers, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. And it's just been an absolute joy, and that made me realize I can go back to the studio. I can go have fun. I can do all these things. And there's no pressure on me to try to make it part of my living, but it's a really sweet alter ego. There's a cowboy hat hanging on that wall back over my shoulder. I literally never put it on except when Chip Carter, the guitar player, comes in there. Any other time, it looks absolutely bizarre on my head.
So that's your Batman cowl?
Yeah, it really is. It really
Nice.
is. And I think I'm going to get a long black duster like Johnny Cash wore, and that's going to be my jam.
Very cool.
So it sent me back to the studio with some more songs. And, if people want to hear something that's really representative of my style and it's not Georgia Bulldogs, go find Sweet Vidalia, which you'll find in the same locations that you're finding Bulldog Song, and it's all on Spotify and Apple, to Apple Music. Everywhere you can download music by paying for it or stealing it, it's there.
I'll put the links in the description so they can.
Yeah. So that was a really fascinating song, and it really blended those two sides of my world. The TV side and the music side really all kind of came together then. But then there's crazy things. Like I think the first thing I sent you, number one, we got to tell people we've been friends for years and years and years, and we rode side by side for years and years and years. And it wasn't until about 3 weeks ago when you posted up on your Facebook page some of your guitars, pictures of some of your guitars. I went, there's no way I don't know this. How have I known Raymond this long and us been this close? That's how much we had to talk about. That's how exciting those times and days were. The fact that we were both musicians, both guitar crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're in another level than I just play for fun and to do goofy.
Me too, but there's other things that are kind of driving this one. Steve Martin hooked up with the Stone Canyon Rangers bluegrass band, and now Steve Martin is a multi-platinum musical artist and highly respected in the indie bluegrass world. And somebody asked him, Steve, how do you become well known as a musician? It's so hard. He says, really easy. He said, first, get famous doing something else. And I've found that as my TV presence has grown, so has the interest in my music. So go figure, how does that happen? But it's just reopened up worlds to me that I never dreamed would reopen. They let us do a photo shoot for the TV show on stage at the Ryman.
Wow.
And, I couldn't even believe it. And I thought it was the kind of thing they did for everybody. So I jumped down off the stage after the shoot, and I told my wife, I said, honey, jump up here and let's get some pictures of you. Her foot hit the first step, and the voice of God came out of the sky and said, ma'am, please don't step on the stage. Please remove your foot from the stage. I'm like, oh, crap. They let me do this because of the TV show.
Yeah.
So, and it's really cool. There's people on social media out there starting little, just a random person here and there who's just that real acolyte and that real proselytizer, and they're spreading the word. Let's start the campaign to get Brother Chip on stage at the Ryman Auditorium. And then I think, okay, go. Because if it happens, it happens. If those things happen, they happen. Right now, what I've rediscovered in the last several years, much to my eternal joy and delight, is my absolute love with music. And it had gotten frustrating for me because I pursued it professionally way longer than I should have. I always had time on my hands. I was a syndicated columnist who played video games, so why not? And ultimately, it led to frustration, and it led to I didn't even want to go see people playing live music because I'd sit there and just be overcome with this ennui of, and I'm kind of like, I can't sit here and watch that. It hurts to not be up there with them doing that.
Right.
So it became difficult for me. It got hard for me to even listen to music at one point because I'm like, it's just, my heart so broke. My heart was so broken by it. So to rediscover that has been one of the greatest gifts I've ever gotten. That anyone at all gives a shit anywhere is miraculous. The fact that in the last few months, I've written a half dozen of the best songs I've ever written in my life, and I don't know where they've come from. And in fact, 2 of those songs happened to work out. So again, I got this musical freedom. Let me pause there a minute and go. We were talking about Bulldog Song. We were talking about Sweet Vidalia. But if people want to hear Chip Carter, the guitar player, there's only one song that they should listen to, and it's called Pokemania.
That's right.
It's when Pokemon Go came out, and everybody was crazy for it, and we were too. I'm still a gamer. Here's my new Steam Deck.
Nice.
So, and of course, we got the jacked up version. So, super excited. Jonathan's got one too. Super excited about that. There's a plug. Get in touch with them. They'll sponsor the show. So, you know, that side of me is never going to go away. Of course. I don't get to indulge it as much as I want to. It's kind of like being a reformed heroin addict. You know, you can't chip away a little on the weekends and expect it to stay that way. So,
it's a commitment.
Yeah. So I kind of try to show extraordinary restraint in that regard.
Right.
And we end up playing a lot of, you know, Mario Kart and Mario Golf on the Switch and things like that aren't just so, they're not going to take you into that world.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard to keep my fingers out of Disco Elysium right now, but that's
good luck.
That's pretty difficult. It keeps I went in and played around about a half an hour, and I'm like, uh-oh. Yeah, I could feel it coming again. It was like, I need that spike. I got to get that spike. So, but Pokemania was one of those songs. I think it was the second song I recorded after Bulldog Song. It's hilarious. It's that same country twang and drawl that I'm singing in, but I'm singing about Pikachu.
Yeah. It is
and
great
then,
stuff.
Since I knew it was a country song that literally no one was ever going to hear, I just said, just do whatever you want, which is what I do anyway. But I just go absolutely balls out wild with two different guitar breaks. The first one is a straight up Johnny Cash 1957. And it comes out of it into some twangy little Chet Atkins licks.
Nice.
And then in the talk over at the end of the song, there's dueling guitars that just go utterly berserk. And if you listen to the guitar threads, it's like, what is this guy doing? But that, because you were listening to a man who absolutely did not care, was absolutely lost in the thrill and the joy of making music, and did not give one shit what anybody thought about it. And that's the freedom I have now. So this new music, we're looking for a window. The pandemic kind of put a damper on the musical revival because everything moved into survival mode. And we actually had the pilot for the show made, and we got the green light in January 2020. And we were scheduled to go into production for season 1 in March of 2020. So the next 2 years were a scramble. And, you know, we were able to get a season filmed in the middle of all that stuff. And we didn't get anybody sick, and none of us got sick. So we handled it all properly, correctly, which is difficult sometimes because this farm crowd is a very conservative crowd. Right. You know, they're very rural for the most part. So that, you know, that said, we were able to do that. And the fact that we were able to do it without anybody getting sick, we thought was extraordinary. But that kind of pushed music to the back burner. It looks like here in the next few months, it's going to get a chance to come back up. Bluegrass kids I were telling you about, they're called Boone and Church. They just won the National FFA Bluegrass competition as the best family bluegrass, as the best bluegrass band. I guess there's limitations, but the Future Farmers of America is the organization. They're a big deal out in the country. Probably not so big in Vegas, but but they just won the national contest as the best bluegrass band. And a couple of the new songs that I've written, think about the Pokemon song I was just telling you about, where the styles just blend into this unholy mix of, I don't know what this is. these 2 songs will be me, my drummer, a keyboard player I'm bringing, and these bluegrass kids. And we're going to meet up. They're going to come down the mountain. We're going to roll up from Tampa. We're going to meet up in a studio in Asheville and see what happens.
Very cool.
That's the freedom I've got now to roll musically, and it's a joy. It's beautiful, and I just get to. I'm surrounded. I'm in an office surrounded by video games and video game memorabilia, stuff from TV shows, stuff from my Georgia Bulldogs, and all my guitars lined up here behind me, and that's just a beautiful thing. You want to talk guitars?
Yeah, let's talk about your guitars. You have a Les Paul with a Super Mario on it. Is that right?
Oh, that's actually my favorite guitar. Okay, how much time do we have, Raymond? How much editing are you going to do?
We'll be fine. Let's go for it.
I'm going to break out a couple, okay?
Okay.
Right. I love these. These are my children, man. All right. You mentioned the Paul, so we'll break her out first. 79 Les Paul Deluxe. There were less than 100 made because it's not the model, it's the Deluxe. And by the way, I'm going to be looking at your sponsor. That was some pretty nice stuff.
Very cool.
What you will notice about this Paul is there's a couple of very different things. Those are Bill Lawrence pickups.
Ah.
See how the bar is intact all the way across? And it's my understanding, I was told, might just be the shopper I got it, that Bill Lawrence himself put those in. So that's kind of a workhorse guitar. And it's a classic guitar. And I've got a great guitar collection. People ask me all the time, young people, how did you get such a great guitar collection? I said, it's really easy. Buy good guitars when you're young. Don't sell them. Don't die. You'll have a great classic guitar collection.
There you go.
That's all you got to do. So that was the Paul. This is one, I paid $350 for that at a music store in Atlanta in the mid-'80s. It had just come in. Somebody had just sold it. The guy turned around and sold it right back to me for a $50 markup.
Wow.
You're no telling what that guitar is worth now. This one I found at a pawn shop in a little bitty town called Madison, Georgia.
Okay.
It's a Washburn Electric.
Very nice. So it's got a kind of like an Explorer fire thing going on.
The guitarist for the band Heart. You ever seen the old videos of people with funny hair and stuff from the 80s? Howard Leeson. This is his signature model guitar that Washburn issued for him. So I found that for $150 in a pawn shop. You know, set under some kid's bed and they never played it. This is just old late 70s, early 80s Washburn acoustic. That's the real, this is the one that stays out just to pick up when you have a thought.
Right.
You know, the one that when somebody comes over, when your 4-year-old grandson comes over and says, "Can I play your guitar?" This is the one he gets to play.
There you go.
Oh, this is the showpiece right here.
Wait for it.
Martin.
Oh.
This is a Martin, and it is the, I don't know if you can see inside there.
No,
This is the Clapton signature model.
Ah.
So this guitar is worth very many thousands of dollars. I got it the hard way. I inherited it from my beloved stepfather, who we lost a couple of years ago. And the cool thing is my mom took me shopping to help pick it out for his 70th birthday because he had always wanted to play guitar and he just never had. So she said, "Let's go guitar shopping." She said, "I just want you to help me pick out a good guitar." Turns out what she meant by good was the most expensive guitar in the store. There was actually a Taylor that was a couple of $1,000s cheaper that as a player I liked a little better then, and I would have recommended it, but she just price tag shopped.
Gotcha.
She said, that's the guitar. So I got that guitar the hard way. It's not a guitar that I would have picked for myself, signature models and things like that. I'm not a guitar collector. I'm a guitar player.
Right.
I just happen to have great guitars. So it's not one I would have picked out, but as I've had it of my own the last couple of years and play it more and more and more, have really developed a true appreciation and understanding of what a extraordinarily fine instrument that is.
Oh, Martin's
must be the way violin players feel about their Stradivariuses.
Yeah.
And probably a guitar like that 1,000 years from now will be considered like a Stradivarius. Not 1,000 years. It'll be wood and going back to dust. But, however long, whenever Stradivarius was doing his thing. So, but my working guitar, the one I play all the time, and it's so funny because it was a total crapshoot discovery in like 88. Actually, my first, Jonathan's mother, who this was a couple of years before the video game stuff, so she was still around. So I got Jonathan out of that relationship, and I got the guitar I'm about to tell you about out of that relationship. It was a Christmas present that was meant to inspire me to again pay more attention to music, even though I was, oh my God, the ripe old age of 27, I think then. So I thought I was way over the hill and everything. I was too old and a daddy and everything to be messing with that stuff. So she bought me this guitar, and I always thought, I'm kind of like, why is this my favorite guitar? It cost $150. It's a lower down production model, but for some reason it's the one I want to play live, and it's the one I find myself reaching for in the studio more than anything else. It's become my favorite guitar. It's just in the last few months I've found out that people who really know guitars consider this one of the happy accidents ever. It was in 87 and 88, they reissued the good old Les Paul Jr.
Nice.
AKA the Melody Maker.
That's right.
And it was just a cheap entry-level guitar. Turns out what happened when they reintroduced it to the lineup, they took some intern or kid on the production line and said, all right, design this guitar and spec it out and we'll reissue it. They expected to sell a couple of hundred of them. They just wanted to see how it would do. But it was one of those great occasions when it turns out the intern was a genius. And he designed a guitar that people now write about and go, this is one of the most surprising guitars of all time. This is one of the most best workhorse. That thing will sound like a Tele. It'll sound like a Strat. It'll sound like a Paul. It'll do whatever you want with one PAF pickup. I resisted the urge for many years to drop a second one in at the bridge, a second one in at the neck.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to risk it. I don't want to risk running it. And most everything you hear, and I think every solo that you hear me play, Bulldog song, I might have played the Paul and all the little guitar fills and everything that are in there, but it might have been this one. I've got pictures of this one lined up on the couch in the studio with the acoustic and the bass. And I don't know why it would be in the pictures if I was playing the Paul that day. But everything, this is the guitar. And it was kind of like my Southern country roots. I was embarrassed that I loved this guitar so much because it was just a cheap little $150 nothing knockoff. And I'm kind of like, what does that say about me as a musician if that's my favorite guitar out of all these guitars I've got? So it's really awesome to see all of these experts coming out and going, that might be one of the finest guitars accidentally ever made.
Yeah.
So of course, the saving grace of all of it is my onboard rider.
You got to put Mario on there. It's
there
good
is
stuff.
There he is. So So that's another way I blend my worlds that have come together. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a glory to to be my age and to have been doing the things that I'm doing as long as I've been doing, and still getting to do them and still have new things to do and new hills to climb and new mountains to conquer. I'm excited every day. I'm scared shitless every day. But I'm thrilled every day, and I feel like there's real purpose to what I'm doing. And I hope as people watch this show, they will see the reality of who these people really are. My fondest hope would be this show could be a bridge builder between not just rural America, where they do this work, and suburban and urban America, where we eat it all up. But also that we can open up some kind of cultural bridge and dialogue between what has become a very polarized society.
Absolutely.
And politics has become, we go way out of our way to never mention politics on the TV show. Politics has no role in getting people fed. Policy, yes. Politics, no. Right. So we just stay out of it. We just absolutely stay out of it. And so I don't know. I mean, it's all just been such an extraordinary journey up to this point, Raymond. And I'm so glad I got to ride so many years of it with you.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm so glad that we've reconnected. And I hope this is going to be the start of us just picking up. And, you know, we're in completely different lanes now. But again, some things never change. It's, you know, it's just a different thing. And I hope with this show, we're going to be able to open up in some small way, in some way contribute to a healing and an ability to communicate between each other. People don't understand the needs of rural America and the poor in rural America are the exact same problems that inner city kids have. Every bit, the drugs, the crime, every bit of it, it's in the country. It's not Mayberry out there. You know, and in rural America, they don't have access to some of the same assistance and services that they do in the cities. So we're all fighting the same fight. We're all fighting the same war, and we're all fighting the same battle. And we've all been lied to for so long by people in power. And their attempt all along has been to divide us. And goddamn, have they been great at it.
They really have.
They've been great at it. And in some little way, I want to show people, just by the very fact that I go out there and work every day, and these people are my friends and I love them, and they have supported me. They have been like family to me. They have treated me the same way that the video game world used to treat me, in a completely different setting. But it's the same thing. It's just the same human decency and goodness and kindness and the love that we're all capable of, until some asshole in power tells us you shouldn't like those people because they fill in your blank, and pick your side who's doing the talking. One does it more judiciously than the others and is less quick to pull triggers that seem really, really mean than the other side. I'm not going to say which one there is, because whoever's listening to this is making up their own mind which side it is.
Sure.
And it's just time for us to not listen to any of them, start talking to each other again. And it's my prayer that through this show, the folks in the suburbs and cities are going to start getting to know some of these folks in the country, peeling back the labels and showing people the faces and the hearts behind the food that they eat. And maybe it'll just help us communicate a little more. Maybe it'll help us understand a little more.
I think so too. And guys, I want to thank Chip Carter again for being my guest today. Definitely check out his show, Where the Food Comes From. You'll learn more about the food, and maybe you'll learn something about people that maybe are just a little bit different than you, and maybe you can find a way to connect with them. You can check out some of Chip's music in the description below, and stay tuned next time for more RPAD TV 3000. Thank you guys so much for watching. Chip Carter, excellent to see you again.